now? I mean, in terms of the real world, I mean, there's the cost issue, but where is Flash being deployed now, and why? And what about those people who still love spinning disk and good old-fashioned tape? I mean, Lee, what's up with them, and where is Flash really making inroads now?
Yeah, we see that there are four main application areas that are all performance-driven. And so the top areas are databases. Historically, block-based databases, right, are extremely performance-sensitive. And in that database world, we've got Microsoft SQL Server as the leading volume, Oracle probably from leading revenue, and then certainly MySQL from a database standpoint. Right. Quickly followed by server virtualization. So server virtualization presents what we call the I/O blender effect, which is that as you have many virtual machines running on common physical hardware, it becomes presents a pretty tough random workload for a hypervisor to work through. Flash can help dramatically in terms of increasing VM density in a virtual environment there. Virtual desktops have been are becoming more widely deployed, and Flash similarly there. It's a very performance-sensitive space, and then but at the same time needs a cost-effective solution. Flash is a really interesting option there, and then lastly, big data. So big data to the extent that you've got with Flash some pretty interesting capacity points. We can now get either an entire working set or a pretty substantial piece of working set with cache software into Flash. One of the things that I think is interesting is there is a misconception, I think, that Flash is expensive. And certainly if you think about what disk was doing before and in terms of capacity points, I mean, disk capacity is still very, very cheap. And so to that point, Brian's exactly right that disk will be the new tape in the sense that to the extent you don't need performance, disk capacity is going to be very cost effective. However, when you go and compare what sort of performance you can get, the numbers are staggering. And this is why the market's moving so quickly right now. So when you think about 150, maybe a 15K SAS drive delivers perhaps 150 IOPS. And that drive itself, right, although it gives you a lot of capacity, when built into an external storage array, it can cost $1,000. You're looking at an IOP that costs $6 to $7.
But of course, just to give the counter argument, that IT manager might say to me, hey, but some of this stuff is old material. We don't access it that much. We don't need the rapid IOPS. I mean, why should we spend the money on Flash then?
Yeah, so and if you have something that's not being accessed very often, then you shouldn't.
You shouldn't spend the money on Flash, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Bob cut down the Flash industry. There you go.
It's you don't buy a Ferrari to go to the supermarket, right? I mean, the idea basically is that for anything that's interesting, I'm going to say this, and I'll hopefully this will be a little controversial. For anything that's interesting now on the web, for example, about transaction analysis, about delivering video, audio, finding connections. With an attention deficit audience, you can quickly take the performance benefits of Flash and convert them to revenue impact for customers, or for cost, or for quality of service. We're seeing that it's not just performance, but consistent performance, and Flash delivers that in a way that is ideally suited for today's mobile user.
But what's your sense in the real world? I mean, there's a lot of hype about Flash, and as you mentioned, it doesn't always make sense to invest in Flash. I mean, where's Flash being used, and what's really the best use of it from your viewpoint?
So absolutely, it's best used in those situations where you need high IOP performance. I mean, clearly Flash, when it comes to dollars per bit stored, is not nearly as cost effective as disk, and I don't expect to see that change over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Eventually, by the way, it may do. There's some very promising technologies out there, but for our horizon and our visibility, when your data is coldish, you really want to store it on disk. Now, there may be some changes to that over time, right? If you look at, for example, if you need to keep your data for pick a number, an interesting number like 10 years, and you look at the TCO over that period of time, I think before the cost per bit of raw Flash hits the cost per bit of raw data, of raw disk, I think we're going to have a transition whereby the 10-year TCO of a flash solution for cold data is actually more cost effective than the 10-year TCO of spinning media.
Well, because, yeah, go ahead.
So these are changes that we expect, and again, obviously, flash is there for performance. If you need lots of IOPS, and IOPS are driven by many reasons, right? Not just doing things faster, but clearly doing things that indeed provide a far better customer experience, a more consistent and a more controllable customer experience, and that's what you monetize, right? If you're looking at the Web 2.0 companies, they're selling ads, and those ads, and how rapidly people actually click on those ads really depends on their experience with their use case, not with the delivery of the ad itself.
You're talking about the trend line of the cost, 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, would you hazard a guess? I mean, first of all, it seems like when that trend line really hits, when flash really is pretty comparable to spinning disk, that's going to be the death knell for spinning disk. But when would you take a wild guess as to when those two trend lines are going to hit?
Oh, the raw bit cost is going to be quite a long ways out.
Long ways out.
We don't see any rollback in the disk business, and bear in mind that we're deeply in this business. We produce the SoCs and the read heads for the majority of the disks that are shipped into enterprise today. We don't see that changing through the rest of this decade. So that continues to grow in terms of bit demand. However, again, let me emphasize that there are cases where the raw per bit cost doesn't have to meet the raw per bit cost of disk. So in other words, flash may reach a point where it's 5, 6, 7 times per bit more expensive than disk, but still give you a better TCO over, for example, a 10-year life cycle.
Yeah, that's a good point. At some point, right, and it depends on capacity as well. So to the extent that databases, for example, an average database, if you take a 100 gigabyte database, that's still a pretty big database. All of a sudden it becomes possible with today's capacities to say, the cost may be higher than disk, but I'm going to put that all in memory so I can get the performance benefits, and now I can bring along all the other benefits of flash compared with disk. So, for example, the fact that you've got lower power, the fact that I have a predictable life. I don't have catastrophic failures that happen, without knowledge. The fact that from a space standpoint, I can go and consolidate in space. All of these benefits, all of a sudden, if the capacity is big enough, all of a sudden it becomes meaningful to go put that into all flash, whether that happens on the storage side or across the wire, whether it happens inside the server.